Normally, I do this show with lots of different images, and I'm different locations, and I'm running around showing you something about my life. You'll notice a different format tonight. I am sitting in front of my computer, kind of washed out. Let's see if the light changes. Oh, that's really dark. That was a little better there, I guess. I don't know. But I want to talk about 9/11, which, if you're watching this, has is the 20th anniversary this weekend. And I wanted to talk about it. I was trying to figure out, I have a lot of different shows on this network, JLJ Media. I'm James Lott Jr., if you don't know who I am, if you're watching for the first time. And I decided to do it on this show. This show, I talk about real personal topics to do with me. I wear my Brooklyn hat as I'm talking about it, of course. Oh, I got stuff just falling over me. Excuse me. Over there. There we go. But I usually talk about things, and on this show, I decided to put it on this series. This series also turns 5 years old this month, so almost kind of a interesting way to do this on this series. But I want to thank everybody who's ever watched any season or any episode of the show. It's usually glimpses of my life, really short, really quick. This one will be a little longer because we talk about some things. I don't know how long it's going to take as I'm talking about this, but it's going to be a little longer. But I just kind of wanted to give my take on 9/11, 2001. So I went to bed the night before. I had it on BBC. I had DirecTV back then. I had DirecTV actually in my efficiency apartment in San Francisco. My apartment was no bigger than my room I have here. Had no real delineation of rooms. I had one giant room, a little nook area, a little kitchenette area, a walk-in closet, and a bathroom. Love that place. My favorites I ever lived in is San Francisco. It was like $800 a month or something like that back then. And that night I fell asleep. The TV had to turn off. Or no, I had the TV on a timer. I had a sleeper, which I have one on this TV here. So after a few hours, we don't have an activity, it turns itself off. And I used to sleep in the bed. I had this big giant queen size bed, and I would fall asleep to the TV on, just a noise like that. I worked at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter at 101 California. I was third floor receptionist in the cashiering department. I got the job first through an agency. That was a great agency that I was with, and they got me a job there. And I was in the cashiering department, a little area, it's behind me. And I usually work first thing in the morning. That's one of the things that was so tough. I had to work in the morning. But for me, I didn't work that day. For some reason, I had it off. I had it off for some reason. I forgot what it was for. I was off a couple of days. So I wasn't going back to work until a few days later. I lived alone in my own place. And at that point, I was 32 years old. And I was a grandfather already. My grandson Zayden was a baby, a kid. And I was co-raising my daughter Monica, who was living in Sacramento. So that kind of little stage. So I would sleep. First thing in the morning was super early, because I remember it was super early, of course, because we're on West Coast time. And I had one of those answering machines, like a real life answering machine. And I always had the volume turned up when I was at home, and especially at night. So the phone rings, I can hear it and see who it is. Yeah, I screen my calls. I used to do that, of course. Remember when you could do that? But I had it on, and I remember hearing a voice. And it was at the time, my then best friend, Nick. And he's like, James, you know what happened? Have you heard from anybody in New York? You know what's going on? You okay? You know what's going on? I was just like, I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe I got confused. I don't know what I was thinking. I was still waking up. I was trying to wake up. And then like 5 minutes later, my best friend, Michelle, calls me. James, oh my goodness. You see what's happening in New York? It's crazy. You talk to your family. I'm like, what? I mean, okay, now she's saying something. So I roll over and get my remote control. And I turn on the TV to BBC. And BBC, I'll tell you something. BBC was showing stuff no other station was showing. Because it wasn't BBC America back then, just BBC. I don't know if it was like because they're in another country or whatever, but I remember turning it on and seeing the Twin Towers and seeing one of them on fire. and it looked like a movie. I was just like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, I don't know. Um, and uh, and I've been there before. I had relatives who had worked there, worked in the one Windows of the World restaurant, worked near there. I remember going um, to the Windows of the World restaurant and I'm able to eat because I don't like heights, and it's 110 stories over how up it is. And I remember it's all window, it literally was all windows. So if you don't mind heights, it's a beautiful view. It's a vast, spacious view. I remember that. But for me, I couldn't eat. And I was just too like, oh my goodness. I remember the building swayed a little tiny bit. It wasn't super noticeable. It's like it just I could feel it kind of like, okay, we're way up there. And I just didn't, it just didn't, so I've been there, I did it. I just didn't, oh, I didn't, it made me nervous. Um, so I was like, wow, it's on fire. Like, oh my God, like, what's going on? And then I saw the second plane go in. And I was like, a plane just went into the other building. And my mind couldn't comprehend what was happening. It just couldn't compute. I saw it, it looked like I said, it looked like a movie. I'm like, what is going on? My phone started ringing off the hook. So it was like from my stepmom, everybody's like, Jason, we're going to come get you. And I remember a second looking out the window, at a big window, looked at the window, and it was a beautiful day. And I know they say in New York, a lot of New Yorkers say it was a beautiful day there too. But in San Francisco, because San Francisco is hit or miss, September is usually kind of a nice month for San Franciscans. You know, it's usually covered in fog, you know, peninsula, it's always cold. But sometimes we get our Indian summers a little early. So there's like, okay, it's happening in September. But I just remember it was a really clear, beautiful day in San Francisco. It was quiet. Because it was during the week, it was a quiet day. I remember that. And them being glued to the television. And that whole day was surreal. Watching the people jumping out. You see, BBC actually showed people jumping out of the building. And for me, thinking, I remember being that high up. If your choice is being burned alive and jumping to your death 110 stories, I don't even know what that, I can't even comprehend that at all. And I really felt bad. And it was just like, my heart was just hurting, my stomach was hurting. I don't even think I ate that day. I don't even think I ate or anything that day. It was just heartbreaking. And then I remember we're calling. Now I had a cell phone that was only local. You have to remember this was 2001. I had a Sony Ericsson phone, flip out, pull the thing out, no text, there's no text capabilities, no camera on it. None of the stuff had been invented or wasn't on any of these phones that I had. And it was only local. I could make certain long distance calls on certain times of the day. I had to pay for extra rate. But on my phone, I had long distance. And I remember trying to call my Grand Susie, could not. It was just a busy signal. Couldn't try to call a couple of cousins, couldn't reach nobody because it was all a busy signal. Because I think everybody, I called my mom and she was like, yeah, I can't reach anybody either. And we were all just horrified. And those of us who are from New York, our family in New York, regardless of the World Trade Center or not, because we didn't know what was happening, because then all of a sudden they said there was a third plane in the Pentagon, and so there's a lot going on in New York. They don't know if there's the beginning of more stuff. We were trying to reach our New Yorkers, see if they were okay. And that was a very scary, scary part. We couldn't reach anybody. We couldn't for days. I talked to my grandmother until like almost a week later. That was one of the hardest weeks of my life because I'm very close to her, and we could just talk, to say, hey, are you fine? Okay. It was so hard. But I just remember going back to the first day of that. I remember just being glued to television and flipping the channels and seeing everything that's going down and wondering what's going on. I remember my stepmom saying, I want to come get you. But so then I remember they said, okay, we're shutting down all the landmarks. And so in San Francisco, we have two bridges, the Bay Bridge and then the famous Golden Gate Bridge. So those were shut down. I remember they shut those immediately. I lived near City Hall. So in San Francisco, they cornered off our whole area. They took tape around certain streets. They diverted everybody, said, don't come around here. If you're from the neighborhood, they told us to stay inside our homes, our apartments. They're telling us if anything crazy happens, find a basement. I'm like, God. It was a little scary. It was scary. It was scary, but it was also like confusing. Didn't know what to think. And but again, it was like such to post this beautiful day in New York, beautiful day in Los Angeles, beautiful day in San Francisco, and this really horrific act. I'll never forget it. I will never. I mean, we watched the footage over and over and all day long, all different angles and what was going on, the cloud of smoke and when the buildings fell, and I mean, it was such a moment in time that I know I'll never forget. I know you guys will never forget. If you were alive and old enough to know what was going on, it was a scary time period. And I remember those huge first days afterwards was scary. Like, anything that's going to happen? What's this? And then I had to go back to work. I will tell you, in the history of all the jobs I've ever had, and I've worked since I was 15 years old, and I'm 52 years old, working since 1984. Those months, I'm saying months, after September 11th at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, we lost an office there, the World Trade Center, and people. It was one of the saddest, I mean, like heartbreakingly saddest time I've ever experienced in my life. And I've had heartache in my life. I've had death and despair in my life. This was on a larger level. Now it's the operator. People were calling for their brokers. And it's like their broker's dead or missing. Getting mail still from those offices, because there's a regular, they send them out on Monday or send them on Friday, and you're getting, and sometimes you get to know. I mean, so for me, I got to know certain people back east that even though we didn't meet in person, but you get friendly. Oh, hey, it's you. Hey, James, California, blah blah. So that's why they'll send something, and they say with the employees, they'll send a little note. Hey girl, hope everything's fine, blah blah, to the people that are there. And so things it was just normal, and so that started happening. I would go to work with a knot in my stomach. People crying, screaming on the phone at me, crying. It's an experience I will never forget. I will never forget for the rest of my life. I had to put on my sensitive, caring side and try to navigate that. My coworkers were sad. Everybody was sad, but for a work environment to lose an office and it was a horrific time. So as I look back at 20 years, I can't believe it's been 20 years. To me, that's somebody's lifetime. It's just like it's incredible that this time has passed. When I look back on it, with just an air of sadness. My heart goes out to everyone who lost someone there in this Rosary Center, or lost someone since. People lost members because they inhaled all the buildings stuff and killed their lungs or their hearts. People committed suicide because they couldn't handle the trauma, the PTSD, or just afterwards, because they lost their husbands and brothers and sons. This is something that happened and continued to have effects to this day. There are children who don't know their parents, who were born after their parents died. So my heart's out to everybody where this is affected, and to America. We were all affected. This was a deliberate attack on our country and our freedoms. And I will never forget it. So I just want to share a little piece of my story. I have a lot of followers who follow me, and just I'm sending you comfort. Part of the village, sharing stories, talking about it is a good thing to do, and to live life to the fullest, because things like this, this life could change in a second, and we have to live our lives to the fullest. I'm James Lott Jr. Everyone, please take care of yourselves and each other.